This is Reimagining Higher Education, your go-to podcast with remarkable education leaders, sharing personal stories from their experience in and around the sector, including reflection and hope for progress. With your host, Dr. Noreen Golfman, former provost and vice president academic at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland, and inaugural member of Studiosity's Academic Advisory Board in Canada. We collectively recognize that this podcast's hosts and guests have recorded this interview from across Turtle Island on the unceded and traditional territories of many nations in what we now know as Canada. We acknowledge past and current custodians of this land.
Welcome, Ted, to our Reimagining Higher Ed podcast. Really privileged, actually, to have you join us because you hold a pretty important job, at least from my Canadian perspective, you sure do.
Well, there's a lot going on in higher education, not just in the States, but in Canada and across the West. So it's good to be with you.
Good. Well, our ears are often, if not always, tuned to what's going on out of your organization. Maybe we should start by just you explaining a little bit about what you do as the CEO.
It's a good challenge for me to actually be able to put it into words. So ACE, first a little bit about ACE. We've been around for a while, since 1917. And we were started by the federal government in the States that asked the American Council on Education, which at that moment was called the Emergency Council on Education.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh.
Yep. And the emergency that we were designed to meet was the rapid return of soldiers from World War I. And the government asked a group of institutions, a group of higher ed institutions, to come together and to figure out how they could make room for returning veterans. And so the institutions and the associations came together under this emergency council rubric, and we began an effort that continues, which is how can a group of us provide access to people who need it to promote their own individual growth, but also social well-being, economic progress, et cetera, all the things we count on higher education to do. So we've been about that business for over 100 years, and there have been different inflection points in it. We were asked to help prepare returning veterans for college, and so we built the GED test, which many will know is the alternative to a high school diploma in the States, and actually it's international now. We were asked to help draft the GI Bill at the end of World War II to provide access. And then we've been at work through the civil rights movement and the women's movement to create equitable access for subgroups in America that have been underserved by higher education. So what does that work look like? It looks like a lot of policy making and policy advocacy. So I spend a lot of time thinking about what's going on in Congress and the executive branch, and I know we'll get into that a little bit. Mm-hmm. They certainly have been on the move, but it's advocating for higher education, and within that, for access to higher education. And we've also been hard at work creating opportunities for people to translate non-classroom education into college credit. Not surprisingly, we started with the military. Mm-hmm. So if you go into the military, you learn a lot, and a lot of it is applicable to general education. And so we have, for over 50 years now, been translating individuals' military experience into college credit. We've branched out, and we now do that with tech firms, for example. So Google is offering a range of certificates that we've all heard advertised. We've translated those certificates into college credits. So someone who gets a Google certificate in digital marketing, for example, can go to a community college or to a four-year institution and show them their ACE certification and get credit for that. So we've been working hard on the policy levers. We've been working hard on the practical levers, and then in our spare time, we bring higher education together to talk about ways that it might innovate in the future, whether that's online learning or other ways of bringing students together. So it's a robust plate of things. I love it. I've been at it for 8 years now. And I think I could probably do this forever. As Winston Churchill said, if you love your job, you never go to work. And that's how I feel.
Yeah, you can tell from the way you talk about it for sure. How did you come to this role? What was your career trajectory, broadly speaking?
Yeah, it's interesting. And as you've asked me in preparation to reflect a little bit, and so there's no real straight line, but I think that there are common themes. So I started out I went to college wanting to be a high school math teacher, and that was my thing.
And where was that?
It was in Northern California.
Okay.
Went to San Rafael High School, public high school in Northern California, and so went away to college and began that path. And I rapidly discovered that there were two kinds of mathematicians. One were the kind that filled out formulas and got the right answer, and the others were those who imagined great infinite spaces and were able to think theoretically about math. I was in group one, and and felt that I was a little bit misplaced as a math major. So, like all failed math majors, I became an economics major.
Ah,
Uh, and anyway, so I kind of left behind the high school math teacher and decided after spending a year or two in college that this life of a professor looked pretty darn good. You get to spend your time with students, these beautiful campuses, and you're, answering questions that are in your own head. So, what better job? So I set off in that direction. Went to graduate school, got a PhD in the history of American education, and immediately left for my future life as a professor. So I spent 10 years as a professor at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, and thought, that it was 10 out of a start of 50.
right.
And along the way, I got involved in some of the governance issues at Dartmouth. There was a time of great tumult. I reflect on it now because many of the same issues are afoot today as were in the mid 1980s around issues of race and political divisiveness. So I got involved in those issues. I also was asked to serve and did on the Stanford Board of Trustees at the time. And so learned a lot about higher ed governance through that experience, and thought that might be an interesting way to sort of move my career. And so began leaving myself open to opportunities for administrative positions, and took my first one at Dartmouth, where I was department chair. And then following some changes at Stanford, I returned to Stanford as the chief of staff to the president, and did that for a year. And that was a really big learning experience for me.
I bet. Yeah.
Sit at the right hand of a sitting president.
Yeah.
Don Kennedy was the president at Stanford at the time, and one of my great friends and great mentors. And I wouldn't be where I am but for Don's mentorship and support. I left Stanford to go to UCLA to be the dean of the School of Education. And what was interesting about that job is the pitch that the chancellor, Charles Young, made to me was that the faculty in the School of Education were quite fine researchers, but they really weren't having any impact on the schools of Los Angeles. And if I was up for taking that challenge, then he was ready to let me loose. And I thought that was a great opportunity to take cutting edge research and put it into practice.
How'd you do that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And the second largest school system in America, right? And one that has always been one of the most diverse and challenged school districts in America. And so I got to UCLA at a time when the Los Angeles community was also very interested in school reform. And so I became part of a steering committee, and we actually worked to create a menu of best practices, I think we would call them now, for urban education, for low-income students, for students for whom English wasn't a first language. We put together a basket of reform ideas that we thought would work well. And we actually succeeded in breaking off about half of the schools in Los Angeles and creating essentially a district within a district in which these practices were promoted. And at UCLA, that meant not only faculty spending time in the schools helping to educate teachers, but creating a really robust pipeline for our student teachers who wanted to make a difference in urban schools. So we did really good work. We got great results. All education is political, as we'll talk about throughout, and change of school administration. Our district within a district was disappeared and kind of lost a lot of ground, which was also a lesson, right? Is that policy has a half-life, and sometimes those are really sticky, and other times they're not. So in retrospect, I think I learned a lot about how we should have made these reforms more systemic and more popular among people who evidently were our critics, because they killed it as quickly as they could.
Gosh, that seems so short-sighted.
Yeah, I think it was. I sort of understand it in retrospect. It was there's always in K-12 education, there's a pendulum that swings back and forth between centralized authority and decentralized control. And this was heavily on the decentralized side. And so I think it was a threat to the status quo and the people who were in the superintendent's office and thought that the way to do things was to create a standard for everybody. So it's too bad.
Has that mission, or the kind of moral force of that initiative, has that ever been reclaimed?
It really hasn't, and it's a disappointment that it hasn't. There are still, there are principals who are still a part of our program who do their best to keep all of this stuff moving. But urban school reform is a really, really tough thing.
I bet harder than ever today.
And today, I think that's right. Today, it's harder than ever because there's now a political overlay that there wasn't in our time. In our time, if you were improving English and math scores, that was good, and people would leave you alone. But today, it's what books are on the library shelves and who's teaching and all of that, and it's a tough game.
Yeah.
So that was my UCLA 10.
So you, with all that experience on both sides, one might say, of the higher ed sector, governance, policy, leadership, and faculty, academic, all of that, you bounced into this job eventually, I guess, right? Did you see it? Did you jump, or were you pushed?
No, I was lured. How about that?
Yeah.
But in between, so I left UCLA, became the president of Occidental College.
Okay.
Which was great, and that really gave me a chance to take a lot of the things that I had learned as an undergraduate about the importance of the liberal arts, the importance of close connection between faculty and students, and to live that in one of the most diverse liberal arts colleges in America at the time, the most diverse liberal arts college in America. So they had a great experiment going. I was thrilled to be a part of it. I was there for 6.5 years, and we did some very, very good work there. I was then lured out of higher education into philanthropy. I was asked to come and take the lead of an organization called the New Schools Venture Fund, which was established in Silicon Valley by venture capitalists who wanted to see if they could bring the same kind of entrepreneurial energy to education that they'd done so well in biotech and high tech and
When was that?
other areas. That was 2005.
Okay.
So this was when they were supporting the building of Google, the building of Amazon, and so they really were on top of the world, had money to distribute, wanted to do it well, and so they thought, let's create a philanthropy that acts like a venture fund that supports entrepreneurs who are doing their best to support low-income students of color. So I went to New Schools. This actually connects back to the decentralized work that we were promoting at UCLA. Our first biggest set of investments were in charter schools. And the logic was a lot like we used in LA. If you really create a school that has control over its environment, control over its funding, that's still a public entity, but has that independent control, then you can bring all of these elements of a great school together. You can protect those, you can build on those, and you can do a great job for low-income students. We did that all over the country. We supported schools in all of these were urban schools serving low-income students, but New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., several in Texas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, and at the high water mark, if you added all of those students together who were in New Schools funded schools, we would have been the 20th largest school district in America.
Wow.
And those schools were outperforming their district peers. They were doing remarkable things and continue to do remarkable things. We also invested in education technology. So many folks who are listening to this will recognize Khan Academy. So Khan Academy was, we were one of Sal Khan's first funders, but we were very involved in ed tech as well. So I did that for 10 years.
Wow. You didn't miss the hardcore kind of academic.
Oh, I missed.
Yeah, I should think so. Yeah.
At heart, I'm a teacher. I still have that wanting to be a math teacher gene.
Yeah.
And so, that was hard. And so every time I was able to be on a campus, I was, and it was great fun. But I also during that time, got to know the superintendent of the Chicago Public Schools, Arnie Duncan, very well. And so when Arnie was named Secretary of Education, he was kind enough to give me a call and say, hey, you want to come play in Washington with me, and we can really make some change. And so it was like a gift.
You're not going to turn that down.
You're not going to turn that down. And so it was like, oh, wow, how soon do you need me? And the answer was tomorrow. And because of my weird background, he basically said, so you want to do K-12? You want to do higher ed? Because under the secretary, there are two jobs. The deputy secretary takes care of K-12, and the undersecretary takes care of higher ed.
Oh, okay.
And flip a coin, and I said, I'd like to do higher ed for a while, because it seems like it's been pretty sleepy, and I'd love to
shake it up a bit.
So I went to Washington, worked for Arnie, worked for Mr. Obama. Didn't regret a day of that. Again, huge learning experience for me, including really coming to understand what public service really means. And I know that American public servants today are under a lot of fire. A lot of people saying that they just sort of sit in their offices and read novels. That's really not true. These are people who could be doing almost anything. And instead, they've decided that they're going to serve America by making sure that policies are done right, that money goes where it's supposed to go. And as for waste, fraud, and abuse, I never saw a penny of it inside higher education. Oh, well, inside the government, I saw plenty of it in higher education.
Sure.
Anyway, so I left when we had an election, and Mr. Obama left the White House, and all of us who served at the pleasure were out of a job. And so I left, and sort of freelanced for about 6 months. But one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was to come to ACE and consult on this area that I mentioned a while ago on learning evaluation.
Right.
Which kind of connected with my entrepreneurial self, also with my ongoing sense that people needed to have more options in college going. And so I was consulting when my predecessor Molly Broad decided that she was going to retire. So she retired, and for one of the very rare times in my life, I sort of had my nose stuck to the window, saying, "Oh please, oh please, oh please, oh please, choose me." And the board was nice enough to choose me, and here I am.
Terrific. You said it was maybe you didn't use the word unconventional, but not a straight line to
Right.
buying this office, but it all seems fairly coherent to me that you brought all that expertise and experience to a role like this, all of which are required big time for, especially today, doing what you're doing. And obviously you have to exercise a lot of diplomacy
Yep.
in the role. And I guess, being at higher levels, sitting next to presidents of universities and being one, you would have had, you would have sharpened those skills.
I joke with people, and joked when I was in the government after a particularly hard meeting, saying some version of, "This doesn't hold a candle to a faculty meeting."
Yeah, there is some truth to that. That part I don't miss as a retired recovering senior administrator. I don't miss that.
Yeah, don't you know? And
Yeah.
so anyway, and every time I'm sitting next to a college president, thinking, this is nerve-wracking. I think about sitting next to the president of the United States and thinking, no, it's okay.
Yeah,
I'll get through this one.
right on. So one of the questions that I kind of tossed to you earlier was not so much a question, but something to think about, because we ask our interviewees to bring, at least maybe not literally, maybe figuratively, an object, something you brought with you through all of these various offices you've occupied and roles you've had. Have you got a fetish or token object in mind that you kind of,
I do, and I'll flash it on the screen, and we can talk about it. This is the cover of a writ from the Supreme Court of the United States in a suit that was filed against me and the Regents of the University of California in
wow,
1992.
okay.
And the reason I carry it around with me is, I talk a good game about diversity and about the importance of creating opportunities for students who haven't had opportunities before. And this was an affirmative action case. And it was the first time that I had actually been called to court to defend that. And so it was the first opportunity I had to really live my values.
And who was calling you to court?
A disappointed parent
Oh,
whose child had not been admitted to the UCLA lab school.
oh,
And it went to the
wow,
Supreme Court of the United States. They declined to hear the case, which meant
wow.
that the Ninth Circuit victory for UCLA and for me stood. But it paved the way for some of the important Supreme Court work up until Students for Fair Admission that put an educational value on diversity. So I think we made a little contribution to case law, but for me the important part was that I didn't ever question whether I should be in the suit or not, or whether the decision was the right decision on the
Right.
way back on the admissions side. So it's
Yeah.
sort of a marker for me and a point of pride, and I've tried to live up to that.
Yeah, it must have been very stressful.
It was, but it was, yeah, it was stressful, but it was a thing, and it worked out, and it was important. It was important for the institution as well as for the kids we were serving.
Maybe it's not a fair question, but I'm tempted to ask, do you think today the Supreme Court would have dismissed that? It's hard
No
to
way.
hear.
No, we would have lost. We would
Oh,
have
you would
lost.
have lost. You can say that positively. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I think things change. And the 90s were very different from the 80s, which are different from the 2000s. And I
Yeah.
think we're in a moment where it's
Yeah.
not just this administration, but I think that the polls reflect this, that the American public really does support diversity in higher education and in K-12 as well, but they are no fans of choices that are made that explicitly privilege race, anybody's race, in one direction or another. And I think that's one of the things that we at ACE have been working hardest on with our members since the Students for Fair Admissions case is how can we promote a diverse student body without taking race into consideration. The Trump administration just last week has decided that they really want to do a very careful analysis of that by asking for a crazy amount of information about all of
Yeah.
the applicants.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfathomable, really, how that could even be.
Yeah, and I've said this publicly before, but I'm not sure that they can collect that information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that we're supposed to collect is grade point averages.
Yeah.
Well, grade point averages mean totally different things in different education systems. In
Yeah.
California, we basically don't have a top mark, right? So if you take
Right.
10 AP classes, those have a
Mhm.
different math, and so you can have a
Right.
4.7.
Yeah.
In Nevada, you top out at 4. And so I'm not sure, even if they were to collect that, what kind of meaningful conclusions they would be able to draw. But the point is still the same. We need to develop mechanisms to create diverse classes without putting our thumb on the scale for race.
So if you eliminate race, what does that look like? How are you going about this?
Well, I think this is one of the great things about American higher education is that it's not one system, but 1,000 systems.
Yeah.
And so different institutions are coming up with their own solutions to the problem. For some, especially big institutions, they work very hard at building a pipeline from schools that are predominantly underrepresented minorities. And the Supreme Court so far has allowed that as a tactic. So making sure that people in Compton know that UCLA is right up the street, happy to have them. So that's one. Two is the Supreme Court also left open some call it a loophole, but I think it's important. In the essays that students write, they're able to talk about the formative experiences, much as we are today. Their formative experiences. And for some people, they will say race has been an important part of their formative experience. And if I were to go back and tell the story that we were going through talking about race and what role did race play, I would acknowledge that, look, I'm a white male and I've enjoyed the privileges that have come with that throughout my career. And there's no doubt in my mind that if I were a first generation Latino, I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I had.
Sure.
And so I think in reverse, it's really important for students to be able to express themselves. And it's part of what we argued to the Supreme Court is that's a protected First Amendment
Right.
for people to say what they need to say about themselves when they're applying for college. So those are things that people are taking into account. There are states, Texas has a scheme where they take the University of Texas, I believe, University of Texas system still takes the top 10% of every graduating class. And so if you happen to be in a class that is populated by low-income students of color, your top 10% is going to give you a diverse set of people.
Right. Right. Yeah. Interesting. Wow. I'm sure you didn't necessarily sign up for this cultural historic moment, but here we are.
No, in a way, it's a puzzle to be solved.
Yeah.
But in a design, sort of, it's a design guideline that we now have to build into the
No,
building.
yeah, yeah.
On the other hand, it's sad that I think that where this comes from is really a lack of historical understanding about the ways in which so much of what look to be equal decision making has kept Black Americans and Latino Americans, some Asian Americans, uh, sort of behind the starting line.
Yeah.
And
But that's alarming, that gap or lack.
yeah,
How do you fill that? I mean, if that's kind of wired now into a kind of popular imaginary, um, fighting that or resisting it or reframing it or re-educate.
yeah,
I mean, it's not, it doesn't seem to me as if this is just a pendulum swing. There's something more profoundly changing about what's happening right now. That, that's what's really alarming.
I keep that's the one that worries me the most too.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I'm keeping my ears open. Um, on the positive side, well, let me just say it straight out. I think that race has become a highly politicized, highly problematic category. And so one of the things that our presidents, for example, have been able to do in their discussions with members of Congress and their alumni is to shift the issue, because I think what we were saying is that we've got this fantasy that if we just treat people the same, everybody will have the same opportunity for an outcome. And we use race we have focused on race. If you talk to people about students with disabilities,
Mhm.
um, it's a place they can go and talk more openly about equity rather than equality.
Mhm.
That, yeah, students with disabilities probably need some scaffolding
Mhm.
to be able to succeed. Um, First generation students seem to be another place where people are willing to give a little and say, yeah,
Mhm.
they don't know how all of this works, and so they should be given a little bit of scaffolding. And so my hope is that over time the temperature goes down on issues of race, and we can gradually shift those conversations from places where they're comfortable to places where they're not comfortable.
Interesting. Yeah, it would be nice if that happens, to put it bluntly.
I'll give you another example, which is easy for us at ACE. Is there is universal support for providing educational opportunities to veterans. And so if you follow that and you get people's heads
Right.
nodding, as yours and mine are doing right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
and you say, okay, well, do you just drop a 30-year-old onto a college campus and
Right.
say, okay, it's all equal now, go for it?
Yeah.
No, you have to help them return to
Mhm.
civilian life. Um, they may bring with them some things from their experiences, some PTSD or some other things that need to have some care. Anyway, it's
Yeah, yeah.
all a part of moving people from where they are comfortable talking about equity rather than equality into this hot button issue of race.
Yeah. Well, it all sounds strong and important. Um, is that where your focus is mostly these days? What are your kind of top burner preoccupations?
I think preoccupation number one is research. And I think what we've seen over the last 6 months is the current administration, without consulting Congress, the current administration freezing, terminating research grants, um, to institutions of higher education on the basis not of waste in the research grant or fraud in the research grant, but because the administration believes that they have behaved improperly in regard to Jewish students. So you're behaving improperly in regard to Jewish students, and now we're going to take all your research money away.
Yeah,
So,
but that's their smokescreen.
well, that's their smokescreen, and I think what they're really, because as I've said over and over again, freezing a research grant at UCLA does nothing to help a single Jewish student.
Exactly.
And it won't, and it really is just using using something that they don't like to create as much pain as they can. And I think that the research it's actually about creating pain and chaos for institutions that they don't care for in general. And I think that they're not accurately accounting for the losses that these freezes are creating in real time for America. So it looks to them like they're punishing Harvard or they're punishing Columbia. Not really. It's hard going for Columbia and Harvard to make up for that. But who they're really punishing are the Americans who would depend either currently or in the future on the research that's being done. So we hear stories every day about biomedical research labs who have to destroy their specimens because they can't keep them going.
Yeah.
We hear about clinical trials of cancer drugs that have to be stopped, and the heartbreaking conversations that physicians have to have with patients saying, I know that this was your last hope. It doesn't exist anymore, and so we're going to take you back into the regular treatment protocol. I mean, that's what's really happening. And then on top of that, you have scientists who are leaving the US saying, I don't want to play in this crazy environment, going to the UK, going to Canada. I mean, I know that our colleagues in Canada are, standing on their desks clapping about this,
Absolutely.
because they're able to recruit first-class talent to Canada to continue their work there, and that's only going to continue.
Yeah. So do you find yourself in the corridors of Washington talking to people about this, or how does that focus or resistance manifest in your day-to-day?
It's a great question and an important one. And I mentioned the fact that the executive branch seems to have taken this on alone. One of the things that is important to know is that these research grants, it's not like gifts. These are contracts. These are
Right.
the government. Faculty members have said, I'm going to solve this problem. I need your help. The government has said, great, here's money to help you do that. And the faculty members are then responsible for carrying out the experiments and so on to make that happen. So it's not like just grant money that comes in and they can do whatever they want with it. So that's one. Two is the government has, the executive branch has curtailed these grants without consulting Congress. Congress has voted for these grants. Congress gave the universities this money and the executive branch is taking it away. So our conversations are twofold. We're talking to Congress, and they understand, and they're not happy about the fact that the government is acting, the executive branch is acting unilaterally. And so we've seen some relief in the big beautiful bill on on research. We hope to see more. We hope that NIH, NSF, and the other granting agencies will have robust allocations in the coming years. And so we're working with Congress on that. And I do think that Congress understands the losses in ways that the executive branch doesn't. And that's, number one, they are watching their constituents suffer. So when Johns Hopkins lays off 1,000 people, that's 1,000 people who don't have jobs, who aren't paying taxes, who are in distress. And those people, to be crass about it, those people vote.
Yeah, no, sure.
And so these cuts are meaningful, and Congress understands that it's a usurpation of their authority, and nobody likes to have their authority usurped. On the executive branch side, we have, in an unprecedented way, and you and I talked about this before, in 100 and however many years, we've sued the executive branch 5 times, and 4 of those have been in the last 6 months.
Wow. You say we, you mean AC?
Yeah.
Really?
And so we have collaborated with the American Association of Universities, which, as you know, includes Canadian universities.
Yeah.
The American Public and Land Grant Colleges in the U.S.
Yeah.
And the American Medical Colleges, on just this issue, on the research issue, and saying it really is not following due process. It's a capricious decision. It's arbitrary, and we've had some success in the courts in freezing the freezes,
Okay.
which is good news, but it's really much easier to break things than it is to fix them. And that's as true of the china in our cabinets as it is of a research project. And so freezing a grant for 4 months is going to have a years-long impact on that work. So we're pleased that we've sort of frozen the freezes, but we still are nowhere close to restoring the flow of money to researchers to do their work and to improve health outcomes, technology, et cetera, for Americans.
Do you think, as you say, in real time,
Yep.
executive branch not really aware, or many are not aware of the consequences of this? When is that going to manifest, or when are these effects going to be felt, realized? Maybe when people don't vote for them, or
Yeah, I think ultimately it'll be when people don't vote for them. And, I think if there are people who are out of jobs and they're able to point to a particular action by the executive branch or the Republican Party or the Democrats, they'll take action. So there'll be some self-interested voting that I think will be important. But I also think that let's take AI for example. AI is it's a technology challenge. It's a policy challenge. It's actually a moral and philosophical challenge. And a lot of what's happening is that we're losing basic research in AI to these grant freezes. And most of the research now is being done in China.
right?
The president has said with one side of his mouth that he wants to make sure that we beat China in the AI race. And on the other hand, we're losing scientists and science and AI development to the Chinese and other countries. And so I think that the bell is starting to ring, not as loudly as it needs to, but I think that it'll be things like the development of next generation solar panels, where the technology is going to move in exactly the opposite way from what the president wants and what we all want, which is to increase American manufacturing. The technology transfer is going to go to other countries.
Yeah. And the economic benefits
And the
will
economic
accrue to
benefits.
them.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
That's where it will hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah. So I think that eventually the economists who are around the president are going to be able to close the loop and say, this isn't working in the way you want it to. In fact, it's working in reverse.
Sure. You have any fanciful theories about why the executive branch has adopted this kind of counter-progressive or anti-intellectual, or one could say crudely white nationalist position on higher ed, on learning, on knowledge formation? I mean, is it a psychological, historical explanation? Is it?
I don't. Let me try. And it may be
Yeah,
a combination of both. I think that and this is an irony that lots of op-ed writers point out, is that all of the people who are exacting these penalties on higher education went to these institutions.
exactly. So it's your hurt the ones you love situation or something.
It may be I hated my undergraduate experience and I'm going to get back at, but I don't think
Yeah, that's too easy. Yeah.
that's way too easy. And so let me go to the other extreme, which is that I have said publicly quite often that if you look at the negative narrative about higher education, that you don't need to go to college, that the admissions process is rigged, it's too expensive, you're going to have a lot of debt, you're not going to have skills that are relevant in the job market, you're going to get brainwashed, and you're going to end up living in your parents' basement until you're 40.
Right.
That unfortunately, we need to own a lot of that.
Yeah,
There is truth in every one of those.
sure.
And I think that's what the administration is responding to, is it's
Mhm.
responding to high prices. It's responding to an ideological, at least lean to the left, that makes it very hard for conservative academics to survive, and forget even for a moment conservative students.
Yeah.
That higher ed always has this dismissive attitude towards work. And yeah, I guess you're going to have to go get a job. But in the meantime, let's talk about Chaucer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need to own the fact that the majority of students who come to our places are looking to improve their economic well-being as well as their intellectual well-being.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I think in there's a middle ground. I'm happy to agree that we need to work on those things. I don't think that you kill the patient
Yeah.
in order to cure the disease.
Yeah.
And that's my worry, is that we're well on the way to killing the patient rather than curing the disease.
Yeah. I mean, the one huge challenge that I certainly acknowledge is it's true in Canada, as it is, I'm sure, for you in the US and others, is getting higher ed institutions to embrace that need for change. I mean, we're talking about changing our story forever and ever and
Right,
ever,
right.
but it doesn't really change. People might say that, or we have to change the way we talk about what we're doing. That's almost, that's a cliche of higher ed practice, but that change has not really profoundly happened. I don't know how one can affect that. I think it's a very difficult thing to do. These are immutable institutions.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, or whatever the term is. But I do think that we've tried to sort of raise our voice rather than change what we say, and
Yeah.
and really change what we do. And I know I'm going to offend 5,000 people, but
Yeah.
in fall's coming up, American college football is starting up. For those of you who watch American college football, you know that there's the obligatory halftime video promoting the two institutions that are in contest on the field.
Or
And you and I right now could write a script for those halftime videos. And they all say the same thing. They all do the same thing. They all show virtually the same students standing picturesquely behind Bunsen burners and test tubes. And it's not meaningful. That's when you get up and you go to the bathroom. And I think that we need to recognize that that's a story that isn't compelling to people. And we need to tell the story differently. And I think rather than starting at the top with look at all of our great research, we should start at the bottom.
mm-hmm.
Look at the work we do with first generation students who are coming to college and who we're going to make sure graduate. And so for me, a number that I think we have to address is the completion rate.
Right.
And so we have a steady 20-year-old completion rate of about 65%.
Mm-hmm.
So let's decode that. 100% of the students who come to our doors come to us because they want a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And we disappoint nearly 40% of them.
How does that compare with, say, the UK or
It's a little worse,
Yeah, I would think so.
but it's because of the open nature of American colleges.
Sure.
So you could, the critics would say, well, yeah, many of those people shouldn't have even
Shouldn't
tried.
be there in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, which then it translates to people then hear, oh, college isn't for me.
Right.
And so that's a loop that we need to get out of.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But when we admit a student, I think we need to understand that we're committing to their success.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just giving them a chance.
Sure.
And so if you think about 40% of people who leave who are disappointed, substantial portion of those have debt, and they don't have the bump that a degree provides to help them pay that debt. And so pretty soon that narrative that we're so resistant to starts to look a little bit real to a significant portion of the American population.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've called that job one.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Committing to student success. And if we are able to show that, that will give us permission to do all the other things that we do. But we can't do the other way around. Research is never going to give us permission to educate undergraduates, but educating undergraduates is going to give us permission to do research.
And, demonstrating the social mobility that comes with their success.
Right. And that's where, one of the things that we've done with your help, in fact, is redo the Carnegie classifications of higher education.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. I know we haven't got all day, but
yeah,
I'm really interested in that. I think it's really helpful.
So the Carnegie classifications have been around for 50 years, and they're ways of just creating groups that are identifiable. And up until this last iteration, they have been entirely about the highest degree offered and the amount of research that's done. And it has created the top of the mountain is a category called R1. And that's a research one institute.
Right.
And to do that, you need to do world-class research at a high level, deliver great instruction, get PhD graduates out into the world, and gain a lot of federal research money. Because that's been the focus, there hasn't been a lot of focus, or really any, on this issue of student success.
Mm-hmm.
So we've created new sets of research categories, which are important and good. But we've also created a student access and earnings category, by which we measure every institution in the US. We ask to what extent their admitted class reflects the economic, social, racial diversity of their catchment area. So for a community college, it's going to be their county. For a state regional university, it's going to be their region. For a national university, it's going to be the nation.
Right.
And so if you score 1, that means that your admissions pattern looks exactly like your sending area. So that's the first thing we look at. The second thing we look at is, what are the earnings that everybody who enters. So we include the non-completers in that. So what are the earnings of everybody who signs up at Ted's College look like 8 years out? And we compare those to the earnings of people who are in similar geographic areas. So we don't want people who have a lot of graduates in New York to be advantaged over people who have a lot of Topeka graduates. So we even that all out. And so roughly we're able to create a 2x2 matrix that is high access, low access, high earnings, low earnings. And we group institutions with like institutions. So Harvard and Yale are not in a group with Cal State LA. Cal State LA is in a group with other regional publics. And so we just put them on this matrix. And up in the upper right-hand corner, which I think is where everybody wants to be, high access, high earnings, we're creating social mobility. We've identified out of the 4,000 institutions in America, and we've been talking with our Canadian colleagues about whether they want to participate as well in the next iteration.
Well, I hope they do.
487 institutions.
Okay.
And so those are 487 institutions that accept a broad range of students and provide them with an education that gives them higher than average earnings. That's good. And I
Yeah.
think that this
Yeah.
one of the things that I worry about is that with all of this criticisms of higher education, we're forgetting that there are hundreds of institutions that are doing exactly what we need them to be doing.
Right. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
we're trying to promote those institutions and help them get some publicity. We've had lots of great regional stories. Ball State is one of the examples. Wouldn't show up on anybody's top 10 list at US News and World Report, but they're knocking the ball out of the park in
Cool.
terms of accepting a diverse student body and giving them access to an education that propels them into economic success. So the more we can identify those institutions, the more I think we can build up trust from the bottom up and
Yeah.
not focus so much on a tier of institutions, 12 or 15 Ivy League, et cetera, institutions that they're doing fine,
Yeah.
but that's not where most of the students are going. Most of the students are going to these opportunity colleges and universities.
Yep. Cool. That is hugely important. Hugely important.
Thanks.
Yeah, I really hope your Canadian counterparts take you up on this. I'm doing what I can
Thank
to
you. Thank you.
encourage them as much as I
I
have
know
any
you.
influence these days.
I know you are. You have huge influence.
Well, never enough.
True for all of us.
Ted, it's really great talking to you. I feel like we have a lot more to say, and you certainly do, about what's happening. I'm sure we're only just scratching the surface of what happens across your desk and in your conversations over the course of a month, half a year or a year. But it's noble work, man. It's really, really inspiring to hear you talk about it.
Thank you. It is important. It is important work. I'm really glad that I have the privilege of being involved in it. It's great to have colleagues like you to work with in this, and together, I think we're going to continue to make a difference.
Have any predictions? It's an unfair question, but what the hell? For the next, where do you think we'll be in 5 years?
I think in 5 years we're going to have a higher education system that is much more fluid and much more centered on learners than on institutions.
Mm,
And so I think one of the things that I'm appreciating about the current moment is that people are willing to look uh, not just at the established four-year universities, but really to look at, we haven't talked, we could talk later about another time about the sort of trend to mega universities showing up around the environment. And I think that's a trend, regardless of the noise that's going on now. That's a trend that's going to continue and
mhm.
probably accelerate as people are looking for smaller, bite-sized pieces of education that they can translate more immediately into the workplace. So that's what I think is happening.
College system in Canada is taking that up more with more agility, let's say, than
Yeah.
universities are. Probably the same for you, but
Yeah, I think that that's exactly right. And talking with the leaders in the colleges, it's been quite heartening to see. I think that there's more freedom in the Canadian system
yeah,
for them to do that
yeah,
than there is in the US system because the isomorphism around one model is
right.
super strong in the US,
Yeah.
less so in Canada. So keep showing us the way.
Well, be nice to think we could. Thank you so much for this. You're a busy guy and you're doing God's work or somebody's work. Yeah, I really, really appreciate it. I've learned a lot, always do listening to you. So good luck.
Let's do it again.
That would be great. I'm going to take you up on that.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Visit studiosity.com/students first for information on the next Students First Symposium, an open forum for faculty, staff, and academics to candidly discuss and progress the issues that matter most in higher education.